afternoon, sir.
Good to see you, Ben. Thank you. Good to see you. Doing all right? Good. A lot of people.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome President Brogan. Thank you for being here today. To be careful with our time, Bill Funk, would you like to introduce the President, or do you want to say he needs no introduction?
I think he needs no introduction, but obviously brings credentials that are very impressive and appropriate for this position. Former head of another statewide education agency, lieutenant governor, president of Florida Atlantic University. This is an individual who knows Florida extremely well, has worked with the legislature in any number of capacities, knows higher education, and I look forward to his insights and ideas that I'm sure he'll share with us today.
President Brogan, we're going to be consistent and go around the board, though I think you know all of us, but briefly go around the room and introduce ourselves, just to be consistent.
Sheila McDevitt, Chair of the Board of Governors.
Carolyn Roberts, Ocala.
Tico Perez.
Mikey Vesterberg, the Corporate Secretary.
Manoj Chopra. I'm a member of the faculty at the University of Central Florida in Engineering. I was the past chair of Faculty Senate there and a member of the Advisory Council of Faculty Senates.
A.J. Meyer, former member of the board as the student representative.
Marshall Kreiser, Chair of the Board of Directors for the Florida Chamber of Commerce.
Hello, Shane Strum, Deputy Chief of Staff for Governor Christ.
Welcome, Mr. President. We'd like to begin by asking you to make an opening statement to take us a bit through your career and to tell us your thoughts on this position and how you believe you're qualified.
Well, first of all, let me say thank you. It's an honor to be interviewed, and I appreciate that opportunity very, very much.
Frank, you've got to speak
closer.
There's people on the phone.
Or Mike, you'll get. We did not introduce the people on the phone. Excuse me, Frank. Who was on the phone? Ava? They'll be on the phone if they're not.
President Genshaft?
Did you cut off our people on the phone?
No, the phone's lines.
President Genshaft, are you on the phone?
They are in and out. She's in Paris. And Ava Parker will be on in a moment, and Rick Walsh. So those you.
I believe Commissioner Smith was on the
Commissioner
phone.
Smith. So just so you know.
Please use your
And
opera
John
voice.
Temple.
Yes,
That's my opera voice.
Yes, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Frank.
thank
Now
you.
go ahead.
I apologize. Well, rather quickly, as far as where I've come from, as many of you probably already know, I started out as a fifth-grade teacher in Florida, and then acquired a master's degree in administration and supervision from Florida Atlantic University, which makes it my alma mater. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Cincinnati, where I grew up, before I moved to Florida, right after graduation. The master's degree then helped me to continue my career path in education and public service, becoming a dean of students, an assistant principal, school principal, and then the superintendent of schools for the Martin County school system for 6 years before becoming Florida's Commissioner of Education, where I served for 4 years before becoming the Lieutenant Governor for the next 5. Having just reasonably started the second term as Lieutenant Governor, I was aware the position of President of Florida Atlantic University had become open. It was exciting for me for 3 reasons. One, it gave me the chance to go home to the part of the state that I've called home now for over 30 years, the southeast coast of Florida. 2, it gave me the chance to go back to education full-time. I had been Lieutenant Governor for 5 years and worked not only on education but a host of other quality of life issues important to the people of the state of Florida. But the thought of going back to education again full-time was really exciting to a lifetime educator. I went back a better person for it, having learned what I did about all those other quality of life issues in the state and how they impact everything, especially education. The third was the exciting opportunity and hope, great honor that went along with being considered president of a university that had given me so much. That master's degree really opened up doors and gave me opportunities that I never ever thought I would have while I was growing up in Cincinnati. So that chance was really very exciting to me. And that leads me to this, and this is probably better for a closing statement, but it's probably important to get it on the table right away. The question many might ask is, after 6 years, a little over 6 years now as president of FAU, great university, great things going on at FAU, why would I want to be considered as the Chancellor of Florida State University System? I continue to tell people, and we all read what we read in the newspapers. They have a way of telling you what your motivation is, whether it's true or not. I'm only motivated by one thing. It is my hope that with the resume that I just laid out and where we are in the state of Florida's higher education system, that I might be able to help make a difference. That indeed I have grown not only in my appreciation of Florida Atlantic University, but at the same time working with all of my colleagues around the state, faculty, students, administrators, boards of trustees, board of governors, grown enormously in my appreciation for the whole system. And yet I know that we have challenges. We've got economic challenges. We have governance challenges. We have all of the things that have been written about and discussed, but at the same time, and this was the greatest motivator, the awesome potential of this state university system is also enormous. I really see a state university system that individually, by institution, is outstanding, where they are now and where they aspire to be. As a state system, I believe we've made some outstanding strides on a credibility scale. I've seen the work that's been done this last year with the Florida legislature. I've seen the great support we've received from the governor's office. I have seen the rally that's taken place from the business and industry community, and all of the other important common denominators that any state university system has to have in place in order to achieve greatness as a state university system. So my motivation is pure. I could certainly stay at Florida Atlantic University, having not too long ago signed another 6-year contract, and believe me, not a hardship. I love Florida Atlantic University and my job there and the people that I work with, and so proud of the strides that university has made. But in talking with the leadership of the university and talking with friends around the state, have just come to the realization that if I am asked to do so, that perhaps I might be able to help, along with other great leaders from around the state, to make a positive impact on the state university system, and in so doing, as I've always believed in education, then therefore make a positive impact on the entire state of Florida, because this system is that important to this state today and for the future. I'll try to be brief in the remainder of my comments, because I know you all have questions that you want to ask. So I certainly want to give you the lion's share of time to do that. In looking at the state of Florida, and I've served in public service in this state, as I just mentioned, in a variety of ways for the past 30 years, and where we are now, what kinds of things do I think are important for the state university system for the next several years to come to help us achieve the level of credibility and greatness I think we have the ability to achieve? Well, among many, first of all, a predictable funding stream and a system of accountability. Those are joined at the hip, by the way. It is always politically correct to talk about more money without talking about accountability. I've not made a career of doing that. I believe that when you are looking to people like the Florida legislature, they, of course, understand the need for more revenue, but they also would like to see a return on that investment for the people that they represent, the people who live in the state of Florida. We've begun to do that in our system of higher ed. We've begun to work on compacts together. We've begun to work on identifying common thread data that is just as appropriate for Florida International University as it is for Florida Atlantic University or the University of Florida. We do have a great many things in common based on what we do and what we're expected to do by way of success. But we're each unique. Nobody knows that better than you all do. And I think we also have an obligation to tease out the uniqueness of each of our universities and make sure that we build on those in the years to come. We don't want to simply duplicate ourselves 11 times over again. We need to be unique, and we need marquee recognition, one university from another, that put together creates a marvelous blend and a menu of opportunity for the students, undergraduate and graduate, who would call our institutions home. So it is important to have predictable funding. We took a great first step this year, I believe, with the differential tuition bill, and I do applaud the governor for his support, the legislature for passing it, but of course the leadership of the state, Board of Governor members, the business community, the boards of trustee members, and all those, including our students around the state who had the courage to step up to the plate and recognize the need to support the differential tuition bill. That takes a lot of guts, but it also takes a lot of vision on the part of students to recognize the need to make sure that our system has additional resources necessary to hire the faculty, to recruit great talent, to keep great talent, and also provide students with what they need by way of scheduling and course sections and equipment and materials and technology necessary to provide a great educational experience. But we still need to work on a predictable source of funding when it comes to legislative appropriation. I can tell you, having just done the budget for our university, even as we reduced our budget over the last 2 years, what a difference it makes to be able to lay out on the tuition side the ability for the Board of Trustees and the university to see where we might go over the next 4 to 5 years based on the fact that we now have differential tuition. We can actually, like a business enterprise, predict a revenue stream, and versus being able not to know until perhaps the middle of July what our revenue picture is going to officially look like once it goes through the system. So if we can work with the legislature, and not only could we, I think we have to work with the legislature to try to secure a multiple year funding stream beyond tuition that would provide us the additional resources necessary to do what we're going to have to do. I've found working with the legislature in years gone by that once you can remind them that these are not expenditures, these are investments, and certainly the economic engines that are our state universities provide an investment opportunity, not just into those who seek degrees, but economic development opportunities, the likes of which I don't think we've yet quite imagined. It really is exciting. And if we can turn them into full-fledged partners in that regard, the predictable funding, along with accountability and making sure they understand what we're going to do with those revenue streams and how we're going to advance the cause of higher education in the state of Florida, I think we can make a significance in that regard together. The second issue is that of governance. That's both what I call internal governance and external governance. People continue to talk about our system of higher ed as though it's complicated and complex. I was the Commissioner of Education, elected, sat with other members of the State Board of Education who were also the cabinet members, all elected. We oversaw a system of public education made up of 67 school districts. Each had either an elected or appointed school superintendent, and all had elected school board members. It was about as exciting as you can ever imagine in terms of its complexity and the importance of trying to work with people. Some think I had a pretty good run as the State Commissioner of Education, and if that's true, I would chalk it up to the fact that in that particular scenario, you don't tell people what to do in some cases because the governance structure doesn't allow for that in a traditional fashion. But you have a major bully pulpit, and you also have the opportunity to work with a board that also has a major bully pulpit. In this particular case, our board sets policy. direction. In this particular case, our board is involved in the hiring of and the evaluation of our university presidents. They don't hire, but they are involved and should be in the evaluation and hiring of our university presidents. And the Board of Governors has an enormous bully pulpit to be used in making sure that we are a system that works together. And again, I can't say enough about how people have done so much better a job as a system working together. I think this legislative session, as tough as it was economically, was a great illustration of what can be accomplished when people are singing off the same sheet. So governance internally, that's the Board of Governors, working with the local boards of trustees, working with the university presidents. Clearly, the Chancellor has to be adept at working with those particular parts of the governance structure. But it goes far beyond that, because there are other very important constituencies in the state university system that we work with beyond the boards and beyond those of us who are hired to work with the system. People like business and industry. The great news is we do have chambers and councils of 100 who are out there, and I think ready, willing, and able to step up to the plate and organize with us to make sure that they're helping people understand the vastness of the economic engine opportunities that we have, how we can create a knowledge-based economy in the 21st century with Florida. We still have agriculture, the second largest industry. We obviously have tourism, and it's a giant industry. But at the same time, trying to better balance our economic portfolio by adding high-wage, high-skill, high-tech job opportunities and making sure that the kind of research we're doing with our state universities is significant enough to play a vital role in the economic development of our state, while at the same time providing more access to students who need that undergraduate degree or graduate degree opportunity. So governance is important in that regard. Also, I'm a old pre-K through 12 man, and I believe we've got a responsibility to work with our friends in pre-K through 12 and the leadership there. I also believe that a very important role for this Chancellor is going to be working with the Board of Governors and others to help secure the new look of higher education in the state, as we're now working with colleges instead of community colleges, and state colleges as opposed to colleges in 9 cases. And right now, that's taking place out there. Some of you heard me talk about that one day at the Board of Governors meeting, the fact that this board and I think this Chancellor need to be intimately involved in helping to coordinate all that goes on in that regard, because it will ultimately determine what our system of higher education is going to look like for a long, long time yet to come. I didn't mention a couple of others, but quickly, private institutions, Forward by Design clearly mentions, and I've worked with the private institutions in the state of Florida for over 20 years and know that they play an important role in creating access and opportunity to students out there. And they're an important part. And then obviously the governor and the legislature, making sure, as I mentioned, that we create the synergy and the partnerships that go along with creating that kind of a state university system. Last 2 issues, faculty and students. We can't do it without either. Faculty, this may maybe getting down in the weeds, but we need to keep faculty through the legislature and administered funds. Our public universities have been in administered funds such that when state employees receive a pay raise, state university employees are considered state employees and receive that kind of a base salary increase. If we can keep them in administered funds, it also allows then the money that we derive at the school level through additional legislative support and tuition to be used for compression issues that we all have. That's hiring a faculty member in the market rate and immediately seeing that faculty member come in over 2 other faculty members who are of equal or even more expertise, and allows you to make those kinds of adjustments, and certainly merit compensation packages as well. Faculty also, the opportunity to recruit great faculty, the opportunity to deal with issues of intellectual property and what I call dealing with creators of knowledge and their compensation, which is different than K through 12 in that regard. These people actually create knowledge in higher education. And lastly is the issue of students. Students want a voice. They want to be at the table, and whether it's the technology fee or whether it's differential tuition, they surprise people, not me, but they consistently surprise some people because they have the maturity to step up to the plate and not only want to have a voice, but apply a very reasonable voice to the process. They want it to be better. Why wouldn't they? And so regularly they show that kind of maturity in their involvement in the decision-making process. They deserve quality. They deserve smaller class sizes. They deserve better technology. They took a great step with the technology fee in that regard. That will help. It will not solve our problem, but it will help, and they had the courage to do that. They deserve world-class faculty, the best we can provide them, and that goes back to that issue of recruitment and compensation for our faculty. They deserve the ability to graduate as quickly as they want to graduate, to the greatest degree possible, and work their way through that degree opportunity and get out there into the world of work and make a living. And that, of course, goes back to the number of faculty we have, the sections that we offer, and our ability to provide what they need when they need it to the greatest degree. We need to pay attention to diversity. I'm so proud of FAU. Over 40% of our students are categorized as minority. That's not what people think of when they think of Boca. They assume that all my students valet park. Not so. Over 40% are minority students, and the vast majority of my students are on some kinds of needs-based financial assistance, and we need to consistently work on the needs-based issue. We don't ever want to price students who are ready to go to higher ed out of a higher ed opportunity. So with that, Madam Chair, I guess I'll leave you with this thought before I entertain questions. I'm happy to do that. There is massive potential here. I will tell you, I see it, and I've seen it for years. I believe the potential of this system really is enormous, and I think if we can organize ourselves and get people moving forward, we really will ultimately find the level of credibility that this great state deserves.
Thank you, President Brogan. AJ, would you like to start our questioning?
And just briefly, as Jay Leno and David Letterman noted, the valet parking is down in Miami at FIU.
How's that working out, by the way?
Fairly well, as
Good.
a matter of fact. Fortunately, you answered the question that I was going to ask. So I'll go a little bit off the cuff here and still staying to my script. But how would this position affect you personally within your involvement and career goals for the future, now moving to Tallahassee and the like, if that were the case?
No, it's a good question. I'll tell you two things I don't need. I don't need any more money, and I don't need any more titles. The resume alone looks like it belongs to an 85-year-old man. I've been very blessed in my career. I've never had a job I didn't love, but there's a chance for an opportunity and to try to make a difference. Again, a lot been written, a lot been said about my motivation here. I have a very fine contract. I think I'm the 9th ranked university president in terms of contract, and that's fine with me. I'm satisfied with my contract. I'm not looking to make any additional money. And as far as titles, I'm not sure how many is enough. I really do just believe at this stage in my life and career, if I can help to make a difference for the whole system, and by the way, that includes Florida Atlantic University, but if I can make a difference along with other people, nobody does it alone, I really feel like all of that experience in that resume perhaps can be put into something that can really make a difference for the people of the state of Florida. It's a personal time in my life that probably doesn't come around often. I have a 4.5-year-old son, so he's in preschool. You can move them when they're still in preschool. It gets a little harder when they get older. My wife is an attorney, but she is not yet practicing because she's helping to raise our little one. So moving to Tallahassee, and I would. I think some people make the mistake of trying to commute to work. I don't know if you've seen the location, but it's not easy to get there from here. I've lived in Tallahassee, loved every minute of it. It's a wonderful community. My wife is from North Florida, and believe me, we would have no problem whatsoever personally returning to North Florida and Tallahassee. It's a great place to live. So the planets have rather aligned both professionally and personally. And again, timing is everything, and I suppose that is a function of time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
I was going to ask you about opportunities and challenges, but I think also I heard a lot of what I think you addressed in your opening remarks. So I think maybe a different tact on that. If you were selected for this position, how would Frank Brogan, the president of FAU, feel about the opportunities and challenges he would face dealing with Frank Brogan, the Chancellor of the State University system?
Oh, he'd be so blessed. Listen, I know what a pain in the neck Frank Brogan is. Frank Brogan is very similar to 10 other colleagues out there. They're all hard chargers, or they wouldn't be where they are. They all are passionate about their institution, or I hope they wouldn't be where they are. But they're all of the best intent. They want the very best for their institution. But, you know, I've also worked with those 10 folks and others in my 6 years as president, and I can tell you they all want for the best as well for the state of Florida. They know that this is not an individual game. They know that they're a part of a system. But they're all competitive. They all want the very best for their own institution. As the Chancellor, it's a little bit like being Commissioner of Education with 67 school districts. All passionate, all hard chargers, all committed to their school system, the teachers and the students in it. And yet it was critically important in that role, and would be in this role, to do two things. One is to work with people, to get them to understand that we're all on the same team here. And again, I commend a lot of people over the past year or so who've, I think, done a better job than's been done in a long time in getting everybody, and that includes me and my colleagues, all working on the same page. And I think that's the good news in this case, is whoever becomes Chancellor inherits a system that in that regard is already better off. The second thing, though, besides getting people to work together, and I've kind of made a career at that as well, is the courage to call them like you see them. And the fact that if Frank Brogan isn't doing it the way you think he ought to do it, you do it in two ways. You have a conversation with Frank Brogan as the Chancellor. Nobody likes to be drug out in the court of the general public. If you can have an inside baseball conversation about what you might see as shortcoming or perhaps a centrist approach to being a part of a system. But at the same time, I'm not above calling people out in the court of public, and did it and have done it over the years in several of the capacities in which I've worked. You are a public figure as the president of a university. You are someone who obviously has boardroom meetings, but also you're the CEO of a very large, very public university. And I think one of the things that I pride myself in is my ability to work with people. But also at the end of the day, if you feel people just are pulling in an opposite direction that's hurting the system, even if it's with the good intent of helping the individual institution, you have to call it like you see it. And since this board is now a party to the evaluation of all of us, including Frank Brogan, I would expect to see that kind of a thing show up in the evaluation. Even before the evaluation, as we see turnover in presidents, I would expect it to show up in the hiring of presidents, because just as at FIU, Governor, and if I am honored to be selected here, ultimately FAU, and soon to be FSU, this board is now involved in the hiring process, and appropriately so. So again, two things. I love to work with people, and always have, but at the end of the day, you have to call them like you see them, and I'll do that too.
Thank you.
All right, well, afternoon, President Brogan, and I think like Marshall and AJ said, you've probably touched on all of our questions today, so we're probably going to change up the format. You have great credentials, you've worn a lot of hats, you've got a great resume. As the president of Florida Atlantic University, what are some of your thoughts now as you maybe wear the hat as Chancellor on what should be the role of community colleges, and what are their roles now that they're going to be offering more state degrees or 4-year degrees?
I think, Shane, that what I see in the future are 3 delivery systems for the state of Florida. 4. I'll qualify that. 1, colleges. These are institutions of higher education that are open enrollment, that are still providing associate's degrees. and perhaps some limited baccalaureate degrees. We're seeing that now pop up around the state of Florida based on some of the statutory changes. And by the way, I think it's working. It's still in its very early, almost embryonic stage, but I think it's working through the process. I think it needs a more aggressive approach. I think all of these do, by the way, a more aggressive approach to how we organize all of what I'm about to say. And if you stop and consider the Forward by Design work that was done, this isn't new. This was, in essence, part of the Forward by Design concept, that we could expand access to degrees, not only associate but baccalaureate degrees, and also provide a greater clarity for students around the state as to where they could go to achieve what. So delivery system 1 it would be the colleges that we now see. Delivery system 2 are state colleges. We have one in my part of the service district. We have 2 colleges, Broward Community and Palm Beach College, and we have Indian River State College. And we're now working, when I say we, myself, my board, their boards, their presidents, each of our staff, working closely together to try to develop a strategic approach to making sure that we're not duplicating effort, or worse, perhaps, allowing voids in services. As that state college begins to grow to ultimately, whatever that time will be, a full-fledged state college, as you see in other states around the country, FAU, on the undergraduate side, will certainly take a decidedly different role on the Treasure Coast, in that part of our service district, while still being the agent of record for graduate education and research work throughout our entire area. So delivery system 2 would be the state colleges. Delivery system 3 are the universities. And again, statewide, providing graduate educational opportunities, and again, where appropriate, a significant amount of research work. But all of that needs to be done with those partners. The great thing about Florida is forever, it seems like, we've had a wonderful partnership with community colleges. We have, many think around the country, the best community college system in the United States. We've got to make sure as we work together to see this system morph into multiple delivery systems, that they're working more closely than ever through enhanced articulation agreements, not just the 2+2 hybrid that we've used over the years, but now even more based on a student's ability to go to a community college open enrollment, and perhaps, as they still do, take that associate's degree and transfer to a state university, move to another state university for graduate work, and then hopefully on into that high-wage, high-skill, high-tech job opportunity that we're beginning to create more of. And then the number 4 is the private sector. And I don't leave them out, because we have a huge number, tens of thousands of students who attend private post-secondary institutions every year. The state, I think last year, provided about $140 million in Florida resident access grants to students to be able to do that, and was chronicled in our report, Forward by Design, are a very important part of this process. And then again, I'll end with the pre-K through 12 system, and making sure we're always working in harmony with them, since the lion's share of our students come from that system. We need to work backward and make sure we're working with them to see to it that those students are ready, whether they go to a college, a state college, a university, or a private institution of higher education.
Thank you.
Frank, probably more than anyone else, you have been involved in the evolution of the governance system, from the old Board of Regents days to each university being somewhat independent under the Board of Education, and now to the system that we have that is still in the evolutionary process. And relate to this eventually the lawsuit, which some of us feel is important that continue and be resolved, not over the issue of tuition, which was never why I supported it, but to get some Supreme Court clarification there. Mm-hmm. Where do you see us going in governance, and what role do you see the Board of Governors as it relates to the Board of Trustees and the Chancellor as the Chancellor relates to the individual presidents?
This is obviously a thorny one, because I'm always in danger of speaking for people who aren't in the room, but I do get around the state, as we all do. I can tell you that there seems to be a growing body of people who believe that the lawsuit is far enough down the road where they believe we ought to just go ahead and finish it. allow the courts to make a ruling. I have a lot of friends in the legislature who say, hey, we've spent lots of money on this. We should be getting close to some kind of a resolution to it, not out of spite nor malice, just to bring clarity to the issue. As long as we're probably closer to the end than we are to the beginning, why not just continue? The other school of thought is it's always nice when you can settle a lawsuit if it's possible to do. And I think even before the lawsuit, if it is to continue, is resolved through the courts, part of the conversation that I really believe, Governor, ought to continue to take place is see if there is a possibility of settling that lawsuit to get people where they need to go, Board of Governors, legislature, Governor's office, and others, to get to a resolution that perhaps doesn't require a judicial mandate. And I think as the Chancellor, that individual would be very important in helping to coordinate conversations with the leadership of the Board of Governors, with the leadership of the Governor's office, the House and Senate, to see if those possibilities might exist, to bring greater clarity to what are the issues and are there things we can do to satisfy them. The best illustration that I can give you is differential tuition. How many major issues were wrapped up in the issue of differential tuition that were largely just satisfied or very close to it without a judicial resolution? People sat down of good intent and across the table came to some important decisions, had some important leaders on board who saw the fact that if we could resolve some of those funding and tuition issues and do it without a full-fledged resolution by the court, maybe we'd be better for it, and we did that. Now, whether that's going to be possible or not with the remainder of what's in that suit, I think we're continuing to work toward that end. We might just find out there are some possibilities in that regard too, Governor.
I think there are many possibilities for us as the board to resolve it, depending upon how we can move forward in the next session with commitments for the future, because predictability is so important. But sure. I also keep reminding people we're not the only people in the suit, and we can only control ourselves and not those other folks. So that's one of the issues.
I really think, Chairwoman, that's an important point, and it goes back to, I think, the issue of differential tuition. Once the Board of Governors and the leadership, if you will, pulled that issue out and began conversations with the Governor's office, with House and Senate leadership, it's interesting how it suddenly became detached from the lawsuit, right, and suddenly we resolved it without a judicial resolution.
It was never part of it.
And that's why I really think we can address those other issues that are still sitting there. And if it's possible to do, maybe we don't have to go to a judicial resolution. If we do, that's a decision we'll have to make. Yes.
Thank you.
That was what I meant.
Yeah.
That others might decide to continue to move forward, and that may be. That
we have no control over.
That may be.
President Brogan, I appreciate the comments you made about the faculty and recognizing their importance. If selected as Chancellor, what further actions would you take to promulgate the role of faculty, to explain to other people what faculty do?
Well, the good news is the system that we have created provides not just faculty but students direct, loud voice in the process, both at the Board of Trustee level, where, of course, we have faculty senate presidents seated as full-fledged members. I was there during those conversations and remember the tug of war over whether students and faculty should be seated on the local boards of trustees. Could they, was the question, could they serve a broad constituency as opposed to a narrow constituency? I think time and time again that's been proven that they could. Both students and faculty, I think, generally speaking, and I am, if you'll indulge me, have done a great job statewide. I interface with my colleagues all the time who say that the contributions made by their student body president and by their faculty senate president on the local boards of trustees is outstanding, and they really have risen to that particular challenge. And then, of course, obviously, at the state level with the Board of Governors, faculty and students both have incredibly important roles as seated members of that 17-member board. So I think taking what we have, which are faculty senates, which are representatives to each of those very important boards, and making sure that as we have all of these conversations, Doctor, of which I just spoke, that both faculty and students have the seat at the table to continue those conversations is critically important. If you are working on an issue, I'll go back to something like the tech fee. If you're working on the tech fee and trying to get support for the tech fee, and clearly the students who are impacted by that tech fee more than most are not supportive of it, you have a very difficult time getting it across the finish line. If you're dealing with issues of compensation, or if you're dealing with issues of research, for example, I would love to see the Centers of Excellence approach continue in the state system of higher education. I think it's a tremendous seed corn opportunity to continue to see us become even more and more engines of economic development. But how important it is to have faculty on board on those issues, so that when faculty are working with the members of the legislature, that we're all on one page and we're all talking about the same important issues. And that also includes the recruitment of new faculty, the compensation of existing faculty as well.
Madam Chair, may I have another
Certainly.
question?
Sir.
It was interesting that you started today with predictable funding, and you have referred to forward by design a number of times. What would you strongly support in forward by design, and if anything, what would you change as we go forward if you become Chancellor?
Well, the challenge with forward by design is the fact that while we've identified some very important priorities, we've just begun. I alluded to several of them before. Access, obviously, it's a major issue in this state. Even though we're economically challenged right now, if we didn't grow one more person by volume, the number of people requiring higher education degrees is going to continue to go up. The fact that we will continue to grow as a state, and that's exacerbated by the fact that we need more and more people educated at a higher education level, is a significant crescendo of need. And so it is important that we develop the system that we were talking about before, where we have multi-tiered, I don't mean that by level of importance, but just multiple delivery systems that will allow a much broader access. And that's a critical piece of forward by design. And that includes the expansion of our existing state university system. Florida Atlantic University is at 27,000. It is my hope we don't go to 50,000. Because I think there's a declining return on investment somewhere. How do I know? I ask my colleagues who are at universities of 50,000, and they will tell you. But I do believe we have room for growth. North Florida can grow. Several of us still have capacity potential, but we can't do it alone. We've got to grow the entire system. The second issue is from forward by design, again, I think is the issue of collaboration with technology and private partnerships. There are access opportunities by continuing to work with the private partners in the state of Florida. There are also incredible access opportunities when you look at the world of advanced technology. I know at my university, for example, we have, I think, 55%, just over the last 4 or 5 years, of our students are now taking courses online, versus a very small amount, a handful of years ago. And that's playing out all over the state university system. More professors being trained on synchronous distance learning, as well as helping to create curriculum for asynchronous distance learning. It's going to be another pivotal way that we're going to be able to meet the access needs. And then, of course, research. That was laid out in forward by design, I think, in a very pronounced way, that truly our system desperately needs to grow its research effort, not only for the system's sake, but for the state's sake. I'll broaden that to the nation and the world by providing what great comprehensive research universities provide in that regard as well. So all that to say, I think there's some great ideas and priorities that have been laid out in forward by design. But I think the challenge for whoever becomes the chancellor, the Board of Governors, and those at the university level and around the state is to take those ideas now and put meat on the bone and make sure that we're getting a better return on our investment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, I want to get a little more personal for a moment. As you look back, you've had an incredible career, and you've certainly documented that for us. Share with us your major accomplishment, one of the things you're probably most proud of, as well as something that didn't quite work out the way it hoped it would, perhaps a non-successful endeavor, and maybe a lesson learned or two.
My answer to the first one, Governor, is always the same. The proudest accomplishment in my life was the day I became a fifth grade teacher. I wasn't supposed to go to college. People in my neighborhood didn't. I was fortunate out of 6 brothers and sisters to be the only one who got to go to college. And I did because I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher and educator the better part of my life. I grew up without a father. He died when my twin brother and I were babies. And we were raised by my mom, who had an 8th grade education, still the smartest woman I've ever met. School became a very important part of who I was and the feeling that I thought was what I wanted to pursue. And so the ability to, even get to go to a college, I went to the University of Cincinnati, a great school, commuted. I was a non-traditional student, didn't live there, didn't rush fraternity. I worked and drove back and forth to school. And then took that degree and put it to work as a 5th grade teacher. And it was the thing that I'd always wanted to do. And I've had so many great blessings in my life and in my career. But that one was hard to top because it established me as what I wanted to be, a professional educator. And I've had many roles in and around professional education. They've all been fantastic. And in terms of credibility and perhaps title, my goodness, to be the president of a university, it's hard to top. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have been the president of the university hadn't I been a 5th grade teacher. And so that was and remains my proudest accomplishment on a professional side. Most difficult decision, perhaps, or something that I would have changed. If I had to do it all over again, I think I would have gotten a PhD when the getting was good. That apparently has become more important than most things in life to a good many people. I wish I'd have done it a long time ago. My career path continues to get in the way of what has been a lifelong pursuit. There's a lot of people who thought that I didn't have a PhD when I came to Florida Atlantic University because I never wanted one. I not only wanted one, I've started to work on one twice. One while I was superintendent of schools in Martin County, began to work hard on my PhD, and then took a career change and became the state's commissioner of education and put it on hold. Then went on to become lieutenant governor and put it on hold again. When I went back to FAU, I've started it again. Here I go again. But while I think that is an important professional distinction, I still try to do the best I can do without it. But that doesn't mean I don't understand its importance. It doesn't mean I don't have incredible respect for the people who do hold it, because I have worked on it, and I know just working on it is a life-changing experience. But at the same time, I guess I've got a few other PhDs that I've racked up along the way that just don't come with the numbers and the letters associated.
Follow-up question. Sheila, before you go to the summation, and I know we're going to be very aware of the time because Frank needs to make a flight. Are there questions from anyone on the telephone or more questions from the people at the table? Ava? They're always very quiet. They're not quiet when we're talking. They're quiet. Are there any questions, any follow-up questions before Sheila? This is a summation question.
I'm going to ask, excuse me, I'm going to ask a couple of questions. I read an editorial a couple of days ago about the change in the structure of higher ed in the state, and seemed to indicate that you had some role that was played in it, and that would be contrary to any information I had, but I want to ask you to tell us for the record what was your involvement in the decision that was made to go K-20 and abolish the Board of Regents and so on and so forth.
It's a good question. Being lieutenant governor is a fascinating position to be in. If anybody ever gives Jeb Bush credit, I never get any of that for being lieutenant governor. If he gets blamed for something, I seem to get all of the credit that goes along with being a partner in that regard. My role in that was limited. I did support very much, and still do, the creation of the local boards of trustees. One of the reasons I did and do is that I watched it for years. I was on the State Board of Education. I was also on the State Board of Community Colleges, and watched a system that had an overarching state board and had individual locally appointed community college boards, and I believe that system helped that system become one of the most recognized in the United States. So I think that we did a very good thing by creating the local boards of trustees. Would it have worked, Chairwoman, by having a super board, the State Board of Education being over everyone? We'll never know. The amendment answered that question. I can only tell you, going forward, I hope the fact that I'm sitting here gives credence to that I support and recognize what we're doing as a state, as a system, and I recognize the work of the Board of Governors and the role of the Chancellor working with all of them. I wouldn't want to be Chancellor if I didn't respect the system that existed that Chancellor helps to oversee.
I also want to clarify something, because I think President Genshef keeps going in and out, and I know something she wanted to be clear about is if you were in this role, would you have any difficulty in taking positions against Florida Atlantic if it was in the best interest of the system? I mean, taking positions against is a little strong, but you know what I'm getting at. That you would not favor Florida Atlantic over any of the other institutions.
When I became superintendent of schools, it was the greatest day in the life of many of the people at the middle school that I left, because they believed they now had a friend in the superintendency. When I became Commissioner of Education, Martin County was delighted because they believed that out of the 67 school districts, they would be the fair-haired child. And certainly there would be an expectation, I think, natural on the part of Florida Atlantic University, that if I were fortunate enough to become Chancellor, that they would benefit greatly. If people go back and look at my track record, and boy, it's there for everybody to see, I've probably disappointed a lot of people along the way in that regard. Florida Atlantic University is a place I love. I have a degree from there. I've given 6 years of it, of my life and passion. But I think people who are smart, and they are, understand that this is a system-wide job, and therefore you're going to make some decisions that will affect Florida Atlantic University or any other that are popular, and some that perhaps aren't as popular. But my people at home know me, and they know that I'll make them in the best interest of the job I'm asked to do, if I'm asked to do it, and the system that I serve.
Okay, here comes just the wrap-up question. One of the things that you have not talked about today is whether or not you have become involved in some of the national educational and academic organizations that allow you to build those relationships and therefore elevate either your institution or the system. Could you talk a little bit about where you stand there and any other things that have not been covered that you think are important for us to know?
Sure. Yes, more and more. You've seen the resume. I've been deeply involved with the NCAA, and that's not just football, baseball, basketball, etc. I've been deeply involved on the initiatives that surround and embrace the academic side of thousands and thousands of student athletes and the credibility of NCAA competition on a national scale. Some of these unpopular with some of the hardliners in the world of NCAA competition. I do support the APR, which is the annual recognition of graduation rates of student athletes. I do support enhancement packages for academic enhancement packages for baseball and basketball and football, which we have plowed through and are plowing through over the last number of years. But I have also, that's given me a remarkable opportunity to network with many of my presidential colleagues. Both being on the national board, the executive board, has given me a chance to work together closely with lots of my colleagues from around the country. Many people don't know that the NCAA is driven by the presidents of universities all over the country, and not just the ones who like athletics. they're all at the table. It is a president-run organization, so it's impossible to be involved in just issues of athletics when you're dealing with all of them without also being able to not only deal with issues of academia, but the importance of it as it relates to the issue at hand. So one of the things that this chancellor, whoever is fortunate enough to be this chancellor, has to do as we continue to try to elevate our visibility in the state of Florida, one way to do that is external, and that is to try to raise our visibility and credibility on a national scale and become involved or expand involvement in national groups and organizations. It is a tight fraternity at the end of the day, and if you're not out there networking, your state is diminished to a degree.
Is there anything else that you haven't covered or we haven't asked you that you think we should know about?
I just will leave you where I started and say it really is, and I mean it, I'm not being gratuitous, it's a great honor to sit here, regardless of what your ultimate decision is. If I go back home and continue to be president of Florida Atlantic University, believe me, I'll be a happy man. I love my job.
Do you have any questions then that you'd like to ask us?
No, ma'am. And again, I don't want to get in the weeds, but I know you are anxious to have a chancellor. And I understand that, having worked with you all. And probably other finalists asked the question, but I would ask, by when would you, if selected, expect the new chancellor to be on the job? Next week? Fair answer. Tuesday.
Well, I think what we said in the beginning of this search was that we would like to have them in place in time for the new fall term to start, and whether if you were chosen, you may have to play a transition role or something. I don't know. We'd have to work it out.
Fair enough.
But our goal of this committee was the beginning of the fall term.
That's a fair answer. Thank you.
Yes. And he is on a tight schedule, but I want to thank you, President Brogan. And I know today is a difficult day for you, and we give our sincere sympathy to you, and travel safely.
Thank you.
And we will wish you well as you leave, and thank you.
Thank you all.
Ava, did you have a question? Ava?
Yes, thank you. I apologize for having to attend the meeting in this manner, but I did have one question that I wanted to ask.
Okay.
President Brogan, and there's been, I guess, a great deal of discussion about the importance of the relationship of the Board of Governors and the universities with the legislature. And I hope I did not miss this, because I know we haven't had the best connection throughout your entire interview. But I wanted to for you to tell me, in your capacity as president, how much of the relationship building between your university and the legislature was done directly by yourself, and how much did you rely upon your lobbying staff? I guess I'm interested in knowing about any direct, or tell me, or can you describe your relationship with the legislature generally? Because I see as our new chancellor would have a huge responsibility in continuing to build the relationships I think that we've really developed in this last session. So I'm interested in knowing about your experience in that area.
Governor Parker, we didn't actually touch on that, so your question is not redundant. I'm a very hands-on person when it comes to the legislative process. Now, since again Tallahassee is difficult to get to, and it's hard to be away from the university a great deal. There are several things you learn when you're working with the legislature. One is it is not a 60-day process. Contrary to the popular belief and myth, it's a 365-day-a-year process. You establish relationships with members while they are in their districts. You establish relationships with the members when they are in committee, and then obviously when they come to Tallahassee to begin their work in the spring. But at the end of the day, whoever is fortunate enough to be selected as chancellor needs to begin those relationships now. The chairwoman mentioned something earlier about looking at predictable funding. That is not something you begin to have conversations about in March. You begin to have those conversations with leadership. The new chancellor needs to get on a horse and go to the leadership, not just the president and the speaker, but committee chairs and lions on behalf of of higher education to begin to build that kind of a coalition that ultimately crescendos in the 60-day session, but is critical every day in between. And so I enjoy that. I, for years, of course, worked directly with the legislature in Tallahassee on a regular basis, both as the Commissioner of Education and then as Lieutenant Governor. I've maintained that relationship during my presidency at FAU. I also did it, by the way, when I was a superintendent of schools. A great deal of responsibility as superintendents have is working closely with the legislature. I enjoy it. I work both sides of the aisle, and I think most of the people in the legislative process, by the way, not only here but in Congress would tell you that. I do believe you can get a lot more done if you have the support of everyone involved in the process. You don't get that by being sharply partisan. And I didn't mention that earlier, but that is a part of the Chancellor's responsibility as well, as working both the federal and the private sector side to help to engender the response and the relationship that this state needs, especially in the area of economic development and advanced research. But that is something that I'm comfortable with. And again, I'm going to leave that question with a commendation. I think the relationship with our legislature this past session was better than I've seen it in a long time. And that wasn't because of Frank Brogan. That was because of a lot of people who worked very hard at creating that sort of a growing relationship.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ava, and thank you, President Brogan.
Thank you. And thanks for understanding
Thank you
my
very
need to catch a flight. I apologize. I appreciate it very, very much. And thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.